Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming. My name is Sasha Topolnitska. I am one of the curators of Constructing Hope Ukraine. And together with Ashley Bigham and Betty Roydberg, the other two curators, we would like to welcome you to our last concluding live event, Constructing Housing During Crisis Ukraine. To remind you, the exhibition will open in New York City until September 3rd. So please spread the word, invite friends, and come to visit and support. We would like to start by thanking the Center for Architecture for their support of the exhibition and for providing a platform for us and our contributors to discuss such timely issues. Constructing Hope Ukraine is made possible in part by public funds from New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. The exhibition is also supported by the Architecture Design Independent Project Grant Program, a partnership between New York State Council on the Arts and the Architectural League of New York. And a very special thanks to Razum for Ukraine, who made it possible for our guests to be here tonight. We are pleased to have Razum Katya Pavlevich, who is heading an advocacy communication team with us tonight, say a few words after my introduction. We also want to express our huge thanks to many friends and partners that we also made along the way. Thank you especially to Institute for Public Architecture and Ale Karavinsky for your hospitality, allowing our guests to stay at the Blockhouse on Governor's Island. Constructing Hope Ukraine exhibition on the upper two levels of the center includes work of resilience, imagination, and inventiveness on the part of our contributors in the face of the ongoing invasion of Ukraine. The work presented showcases how architectural skills can serve as a tool to direct outrage and grief into effective action. It is essential to understand and learn from the way architectural methodologies, construction practices, and design skills are used to form a collective resistance in Ukraine. We believe that the built environment plays an important role in care and collective healing of society. We believe that the actions of the grassroots initiatives exhibited here will resonate beyond Ukrainian context and will expand on the role of architecture beyond the typical scope, inspiring existing and new professionals to acknowledge an important role we have in serving communities in need. I would like now to welcome Katya Pavlevich from Razum for Ukraine to say a few words.
Hello, everyone. My name is Katya Pavlevich. It is a true privilege to represent Razum at this event today. I wanted to tell a couple of words about the organization, like Razum for Ukraine. We're probably the largest nonprofit in the US, benefiting Ukraine, based in New York, and we were founded 10 years ago during the Ukrainian Revolution of Dignity. And since then, our mission has and still is to maintain the principles of the Revolution of Dignity and to make sure that Ukraine continues being democratic, prosperous, and victorious. And we do commemorate the 10-year anniversary this year with proud achievement of having contributed more than $100 million to different initiatives benefiting Ukraine and expanding our work to 5 programs. Razum not only delivers humanitarian aid to first responders and defenders of Ukraine, but also advocates for bipartisan support of Ukraine in the US, improves medical care in Ukraine, and supports civil society organizations that are doing an incredible job on site. The program that supported this particular amazing MSA exhibition is called Razum Connect, and its mission is to build bridges between Ukraine and the US and to make Ukrainian voices heard in the US. I, however, define informally the mission of this program is to get people curious and excited about Ukraine. Ukraine has a lot of things to offer that are not known or communicated in the world. We're not just a breadbasket of Europe. We're the country of scientists, artists, architects, journalists, who have to solve problems that nobody faced before. And we do it well. And our scientists know the true power of innovation, and our artists have to visualize unimaginable things. And Ukraine has a lot of experience and unique knowledge to offer. We solved problems nobody knew how to solve. how to educate children in bomb shelters, how to combat huge amount of propaganda with limited resources, how to build dignified housing during the war, and to place millions of displaced people and give them hope. I thank you for being here today, being curious about Ukraine, listening, and I invite you to share the stories and knowledge you hear today with your community, colleagues, friends, to support projects like these, organizations like Razom, and together we will make Ukraine victorious. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katya, and thank you for the amazing work that Razom is doing. If you are looking for a way to support Ukraine, donations to Razom do so much, including cultural activities like this, but also first responders. So thank you. My name is Ashley Bigham, another one of the curators, and it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's speakers. Anna Pajinska. Excuse me. Tanya Pajinska and Iman Fayyad. We're so excited to have them. Anya and Tanya have traveled from Ukraine to be here with us tonight. Iman has come down from Syracuse to be with us tonight, so we're very excited to have them. Anya is co-founder and curator of the MetaLab Urban Laboratory, the biennial city scanning session, and makerspace in Ivano-Frankivsk, Ukraine. She's project lead on a wide range of projects specialized in spatial research and design, product design, and community-led public space projects, and institutional planning. With the MetaLab team, she works supporting a social, equal, spatial, and comfortable, and culturally rich, and environmentally responsive, balanced built environment. In order to reach these goals, MetaLab aims to create a supportive environment and a field for experimentation where the social and spatial potential of the city can be developed and tested in practice. Tanya is also co-founder of the Co-Haty project. She is an architect, stage designer, and 3D artist of 10 years working experience in Austria, Germany, and Ukraine. Through most of her architectural career, she's focused on repurposing and planning residential buildings. She studied at the Technical University of Lviv in Ukraine and also in Vienna, Austria. Her design practice is based on hands-on experimentation and collaboration with local manufacturers and community. Her background in dance influences her interest in designing spaces for performance and movement. They are also the authors, the MetaLab team, they are the authors of the Co-Haty project, which is exhibited in our exhibition directly up there, including the bed, which is suspended in the double height space. So if you see from the storefront, from the street, you probably saw part of theirs. We also are gonna end our event a few minutes early before the center closes tonight, so that as you exit, you can also take a moment to look at all of the projects, including theirs, which is right there. In addition to the amazing work which is exhibited here in the gallery of projects that they've done in Ukraine, there's also a beautiful handmade quilt, the bright red quilt on the bed there, made by the MetaLab team. We're actually auctioning that quilt off as part of the exhibition. The money goes directly to support the housing projects for internally displaced people in Ukraine and to support their amazing work, which they will discuss tonight. There's a QR code directly up there if you want to bid on that through the silent auction. It's also on the website called Give Butter. That's a donation website that the QR code links to, so please check that out, and you could take home this really stunning quilt that they've designed that explains their project. The third guest of the evening that I will introduce is Iman Fayyad. She is a designer and assistant professor of architecture at the Harvard University Graduate School of Design, where she teaches and conducts research in spatial geometry, with a focus on tectonics, construction, and representation. She's founding director of Project IF, an award-winning research practice that explores architectural geometry's relationship with material economy, sensory perception, and the politics of physical space and building practice. Her writing and design work have been widely published and exhibited, including in the New York Times, the Nexus Network Journal, Log, Pigeon, Yale Architecture Gallery, Citigroup, Carnegie Museum of Art, and many, many more. So Iman will begin with our first presentation, and then Tanya and Anya and Anna will follow. Also, just to say, we wanted to, in this last event, actually expand the conversation beyond Ukraine. As Sasha mentioned, we understand that the destruction of housing, cultural heritage sites, and the built environment is actually a global issue. It is not only limited to the events that are ongoing in Ukraine. We actually wanted to, again, build bridges between people of different nations going through different crises and actually find solidarity in tonight's conversation. So with that, I introduce Iman.
All right. Thank you so much to Ashley, Sasha, Betty, and everyone for putting on this beautiful show, first of all, and congratulations. I already feel, so this is my also first time looking at this show, and I already feel very inspired from, first of all, the efforts that are going on in Ukraine and the work that MetaLab are doing. So it's an honor for me to be here and to talk about the context of this type of work in another region. In this particular case, in Gaza, and then just broadly in other parts of Palestine, beyond just the context of this particular war. So just a little bit of maybe my own kind of personal take on this. I actually really love the idea, and I was just mentioning this as we were going around the show, this idea of talking about this as constructing hope. And I feel like it's really difficult to feel hopeful in times like this. It's especially difficult to feel hopeful when you have personal experiences that are attached to these stories and these events. And so I feel like there's maybe a pairing in both what I will talk about today and then what Anna and Tanya will talk about, that I think will sort of pair nicely and different ways of seeing how we can sort of look to the future, learn from each other, et cetera. So I do just want to say, like, putting it into the context of both wartime events, different geographic regions, and different stories, that I think it's really important to focus on this idea of hope in the future. So just a little bit of background. I recently, and this is sort of how this conversation came up, wrote a story. I myself am Palestinian. I grew up there, and I recently wrote a story about a family's house that has been consistently rebuilt in not Gaza, but in a part of the West Bank that I'll sort of talk about in a minute. But it kind of came at the time of, I'd actually told the story in the past, about 8 years ago, in a festival that was based on art, architecture, and film in Palestine, and how we sort of tell the story of our families, our histories, our lives, through the lens of housing in this particular case. And I kind of thought about it again in the context of this war, particularly because obviously of the destruction, first of all, of lives, the destruction of the built environment, but particularly the destruction of homes and what has been sort of referred to as domicide. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that term now. And I kind of wrote about it because through the lens of this one particular family's house, there's so much that we can learn about the, not again necessarily the policies of war, but just general policies that sort of affect the way that people kind of identify with the notion of the home. And in this particular case, this is a house that exists in an area in the West Bank that, maybe I'll jump to that now, but this is a house that exists in the area in what is known as Area C in the West Bank. So in the Oslo Accords in the mid-90s, the West Bank was sort of divided into 3 areas, areas A, B, and C. Areas A and B both have some kind of administration of Palestinian control. So Area A is under full Palestinian control, both civil and security. Area B is under joint Palestinian and Israeli control, so it is under Palestinian civil control, Israeli security control. And then Area C, which is the majority of the West Bank, is under full Israeli security and civilian control. Within Area C, about 70% of that landmass is actually not available for Palestinian construction. That's typically where Israeli settlements are getting built. However, a lot of Palestinians own land there. They have purchased it, and they rightfully have ownership of properties. About 29% of that land is technically open to building permits, but really only in about 1% of the Area C are building permits actually accepted by people who own those parcels of land and want to build, for the most part, residential buildings in there. About 1.5% of those building permits are accepted. So what typically has happened since the 90s is that people who have owned these lands have continuously applied for building permits and have been denied the granting of these building permits. Eventually, people build the house and unfortunately then gets demolished by Israeli authorities. And so this one particular family started building their house in 1994. The first demolition happened in 1998. And then between 1998 and 2003, the house was demolished 4 times. So every time the Israeli authorities came to destroy it, the family came back and rebuilt it. And it sort of has since then become this sort of symbol of resilience amongst both displaced Palestinians, but also people kind of living in the diaspora all over the world. And at some point, it sort of became, so they would rebuild it and live in it again, and it became this sort of idea about how, you know, the notion of home is something that doesn't only exist within the confines of the shell that sort of houses you. At some point, the house was actually turned over to a committee called the Israeli Committee on House Demolitions that deals with this particular circumstance. There's about 1,500 houses that get demolished in Area C and other parts of the West Bank every year, displacing on average every time about 60,000 people. So the Israeli Committee on House Demolitions at some point took on this house as a peace center. So the family sort of, at some point, it was too traumatic for them to keep watching their house get rebuilt. The couple have 7 children, so it's a family of 9. Eventually, ICAD took it over and they now sort of rebuild it, and it has become a peace center. So whenever it gets demolished, they have volunteers, both Israeli, Palestinian, and then also international volunteers come in and rebuild it. And there's actually a kind of beautiful, where we were talking about the Raven, and hopefully you'll get to see parts of this show, but this idea of sort of community that comes together to rebuild. And there's a really difficult kind of space where you want to talk about, obviously, the trauma of the destruction of your home, which is, again, not just something that is a sort of like a financial investment. It's not just a physical object. It is the source of so much of who you are, your livelihood, your memories, your personhood. But every time this sort of got rebuilt, there was always a kind of inaugural sort of celebration and a dinner, and they would invite people in the area to sort of celebrate it. And so sort of telling the story of this, I think, was a kind of an important reminder in the context of the war in Gaza, because the destruction of homes or domicile generally is often talked about in the context of war, but happens in the US all the time. It happens in various contexts outside of wartime conflict as well. And so it was kind of important to sort of shed light on that, but also the spirit of the kind of the resilience of wanting to rebuild and reconstruct. So maybe just to sort of talk a little bit about the effects of this in Gaza, and I think it's important maybe to, in the conversation, sort of talk about the differences in context, maybe in the efforts that are going on in Ukraine versus other places. In this particular case, there's obviously, as someone who is from the region, who knows a lot of people who have been affected by this, that it almost feels shameful sometimes to talk about or mourn the loss of the built environment, whether it's your home, whether it is a mosque or a church or a school, or any sort of physical sort of space, even roads that have been sort of been bombed. It's almost shameful to talk about or mourn the loss of these things while people are dying. But at the end of the day, it's actually an enormously traumatic sort of, part of the effects of war and things that will last for decades to come. So at this point, there have been, apart from housing, so there's been, I think at this point, around 80, depending on the region, but 60% of housing units in all of Gaza have been destroyed. in some neighborhoods, so in the northern part of Gaza, about 82% of housing units have been destroyed. Half of the population, so about 1.2 million people, have now been permanently sort of will not ever return to a home, so their houses have been entirely destroyed. And virtually the entire population of Gaza, so 2.5 million people, have been internally displaced, so have lost some form of a home. And at this point, I think around 50 significant cultural sites have been also destroyed entirely. A lot of these are also, and the reason this is significant, I think, in the context of not just talking about the built environment and the significance of cultural spaces, but a lot of these spaces have also been, in this particular case, served as housing for people, temporary shelters. So a lot of these are mosques, they're schools, other types of cultural centers. And one of the things that I think is really sort of, obviously heartbreaking, but really moving is that as of late there's been, and this is something that's obviously quite traumatic in the context of Gaza, because this has happened almost every 2 to 3 years. This is obviously the sort of largest scale war that has happened in Gaza, but since the year 2000, there have been 4 pretty severe rounds of violence where, you would think that people would sort of lose hope at that point, because every time something gets destroyed, it will most likely get destroyed again in 2 to 3 years. And yet we still see this kind of thing happening. And so as of a few months ago, there has been this sort of movement around Gaza where people have sort of been going around these cultural sites, the destroyed homes, and sort of just like marking the rubble, saying we will rebuild. And maybe one of the things that I think is super, maybe a little bit difficult to talk about also in the context of Gaza, is that there have been efforts in the past to, for instance, thinking about what architects can do, what we can do in the built environment, how we can sort of leverage local resources also to rebuild. There have been efforts in the past to either invent new building types, so building types that do not have to rely on the importing of construction materials, so no cement, things like that. Also how we might reuse rubble to reconstruct. Unfortunately, in the context of this war, so much of the rubble has undetonated explosives, and so there's on average about 10 explosives that happen sort of spontaneously throughout every day. And so it's a really challenging kind of problem now, because Gazans do have to rely on the import of construction and building materials, which even if they were imported at 5 times the rate that they typically are, would take about 16 years to rebuild all fully destroyed homes. It'll take about 80 years, I think was the UN's latest estimate, about 80 years to rebuild all of Gaza, at about $40 billion. So there's a sort of like, I think a really difficult way to talk about either current efforts or future efforts in this case, but it also opens up, new conversations that we might sort of think about how we would leverage resources of the built environment, how we might think about the relationship between the street and the home, how we might think about cultural centers, open spaces, public spaces that are now, for the most part, shared by the entire community. And so I, just from a kind of personal point of view, I think it's really, really amazing to see the work that happens elsewhere, to learn from other people, and yeah, see how we can sort of be in community with each other as well. So thank you so much for the opportunity. And yeah.
I don't know how you do it. And maybe we could just take a moment of silence for everyone who is defending and gave their lives for freedom and justice. By the way, we are also working with new materials to create new materials out of the rubbles. And this is a very important thing right now as well, to develop new materials that you don't have to import, export from the country. And I think it's a Common ground. Common problems, yeah. Yeah, I think it's very important to talk about, yeah, it's a wonderful name for the exhibition, like how do you construct when everything is destroyed and when there is so much destruction and suffering, and how much can it bring to the community. And I think, yeah, this is how our project started.
Co-Haty
Yeah.
is a Ukrainian word to love, but we have two words for love. There is like, I love my phone, and there is a word, I love a person, like to love somebody. And this is Co-Haty, to love. But hata is a house, a hut, and hate are huts. So it's a co-housing and with love to people. So it was the perfect word for that.
So this is the name of our housing project. It started very, very early in the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Before that, like we are an NGO, MetaLab, which exists since 2018. We are more of, like we used to be in more of a small, like 7 people R&D team who did a lot of spatial research, spatial strategies, festivals, product design, workshops, a lot of education. Like we were developing the community in Ivano-Frankivsk, it's the Western Ukraine. Sometimes I have a feeling that we were preparing ourselves because we did the research on so many cities and neighborhoods, and we've developed a community around an NGO, and we were talking about circular economy, about production, manufacturing, like new types of architecture. And I would say it was tough to talk about that until the urgency arrived, and we were a bit like underground, I would say, alternative. And we were always also a female-driven group of architects and designers, and now it's like, yeah, it's playing like new colors, like all the principles, all the beliefs we had, like it just let us do what we could do during the very hard time. So the full-scale invasion began, and it was really tough because we were not sleeping, we were running in the bomb shelters. First missiles arrived to our city, you see on the left, and at 7 a.m. 24th, 22. But in 2 hours we were in the office and like trying to figure it out, what can we do? And we were doing a lot of first emergency response, like building defense structures, like drawing defense structures.
In our makerspace.
Building a lot. So it was a very new skill, like to do that all. Also like rebuilding ambulance, like a bus into a huge ambulance which could deliver more people, or yeah, like all this kind of stuff an architect would, is not being taught, I think, to do. Yes, and then we've seen that like in 3 days we realized that like every housing capacity in the Western Ukraine is exhausted, and we have only like very temporary like sport halls, I don't know, solutions. And then like in few days there started to appear like big scale housing projects or reconstructing the cities projects, and there was like nothing in between. So we knew, like after 2014, we also don't want to build ghettos, and we want a very integrated and clever and dignified housing solutions. So we knew this is something we want to dive in. And after a certain research, like which
we were watching how the people were living in their, when they fled their like dangerous zones, they were living in places like this for grandmothers or like people who were having like special like, needs. Yeah, it was a disaster, and we decided that the housing is needed and proper, with dignity, with better quality, with
So we also realized, like it lasted maybe a week, but it felt like forever. Like that we were like looking through diverse structures we could repurpose for housing, and we found out that there are lots of abandoned structures like hotels, dormitories, camps, so on. And we chose our first building and started like it started as a huge movement of IDPs, like internally displaced people and locals, like to refurbish this building. This is a 4-story building for 175 people, which was restored in 6 weeks. With a super low budget, so we
just came there like with some tools, like or bought like the tools like nearby, and I was not like in my working clothes, but we just tried to scratch if the wall will fall, you know, and then it just started, and then friends of friends came, and then friends of friends came, and we were like about sometimes like 50 to 100 people on the building side just doing something. It was like a beehive.
Yeah, so we had over 200 volunteers, a lot of support from abroad. We also collected a lot. It's not a lot, like this building costed like around $30,000 or $40,000 at that point, but like the whole building was repaired. So it means like from this, with the effort of people, you get something like this.
This was later.
Yeah, this was later, but the quality, like we were trying to deliver something which is not a house, it's a home. It's like the most important thing was for us like to deliver something which can cure at least a bit. So people were bringing some textiles, like for the domestication. We were having an open call, like for plants, for something which is alive and which can bring you something like a certain feeling of home for those who lost everything. Yeah, architecture during this time looks like that. All our drawings were like, or palettes or whatever, were like really like very fast DIY, like sketched on the phone, like glued on the wall. So it was like very, very fast solutions, because I think, so this was our building management. They like destroy this, paint this, like make a hole here. So it was super fast, because you need to manage it all. You need to design, to manage volunteers, to get the materials, to deliver, to draw the drawings for furniture, and it all was happening like every second. If we were on the site, this was our office, and the office on the building site. So I think in 10 days we got first rooms ready. So it was super crazy. Like some manufacturers were arriving and telling, okay, I have a factory, I have people, but I don't know what to do. We were drawing like beds and shelves overnight, and they were producing in few days like, I don't know, 100 beds. And it was like such a huge like common effort, like which was only possible like in this way. So in 2 years, we were able to deliver 7 buildings for 1,500 people, fully renewed, like replanned with all the like electricity pipes, roofs, windows, floor, like everything. So it was also like we were, just for your understanding, that Ukraine has almost no rental housing or no municipal housing. The whole country in 30 years was able to create social housing for 1,500 people is something one NGO created in 2 years. And this was a great achievement. And we also, like, okay, we are trained as architects, but basically we did everything, like fundraising, grant writing, reporting, designing, creating building
Community
teams,
creating, talking to the people on the side, like matching the internally displaced with the locals, doing co-creation workshops.
So it was like a really full cycle of providing a home, which was super new for us and super complicated, but also very, very exciting. And this is something which does not exist in Ukraine. There is no municipal rental housing. There is no non-for-profit rental housing. This is something we really needed to create financial models, legal models, yeah, for sure, architecture, planning, and so it was easy for us. But like all the other stuff we had to learn, we had to team up, we had to expand, and this was, it is still like a very, very exciting journey. So basically through this 2 years, we started from the movement, and now we are influencing the governmental policies on housing and creating a non-for-profit and municipal models for rental housing, crisis housing, and social housing. And yeah, we were working in mostly, it's not very visible, but mostly in the West, but also we worked in the South, in the occupied territories, very close to the front lines, rebuilding homes for those who had them destroyed. Yeah, it was super important for us that it's sustainable, it's safe, and you have a social cohesion, and it's integrated, and yeah, the best thing was that people told that we gave them not a house, that we gave them the community and actually a new life where they could actually rebuild their lives. They started cooking, they started, I don't know, talking with kids. So it's...
the most active people, they like got jobs in the community, like social worker, yeah, or cleaning, or I don't know. We managed to gather some men which were building our furniture after for the next projects, for example. So it went like people got, yeah, new friends, new life, and they became almost a family. And all, like we were 7 in the beginning, like before the war, and now we are around 30 people in our like base. And I think those 23 are internally displaced people which came to volunteer with us, and now we are like a bigger team altogether.
It's also important for us to talk about the mission-driven projects and mission-driven housing, which has like no boundaries, no limits to reach the goal. So you are not framed with some policies or we have the legislation and we need to follow it, but still you kind of do anything just to achieve your mission and to achieve your goal. And we find this is very important, and the role of the third sector in Ukraine now is super important. And this is just some principles and examples that even during such a hard times, you can actually follow some extra principles and guidelines you have internally, yes. So we were always talking about the circular economy, but only in this point, you know, okay, you don't have the materials. You cannot buy IKEA bed. You can, so you kind of really, like at this point, you know what circular economy is, what local manufacturing is, because
why women are important when men go to war, you know, why should you try to build, and yeah, women-led also.
So we were designing all this local furnitures you can see also here on the exhibition, which are easy to assemble, disassemble, have storage space, have some sitting height. So like with all the other thoughts and super different from what is used to be before that. And we actually did a furniture production for these houses. From also the team was internally displaced people. We also like work a lot with materials. So these are examples like how you do building materials from the rubble, and other stuff with medical care or growing leather from kombucha. So it's kind of like a side
Hobby project.
yeah, and or the lamps for the blackouts, right? So yeah, and like we really wanted like the community spaces to have like a really high standard, so that a community can gather there and be created there. So it's not about only your privacy and the dignity for one person, but it's also like creating a whole new society and community.
But here you can also see, like, for example, furniture from Zurich that was sent to us. It's like used furniture that we reused in our spaces, and everyone was so excited about the nice place to be.
So yeah, we are co-designing so that everyone who lives there, they have like a certain responsibility for the space they are in. There is like we replan all the buildings so that everyone has their. It should be like moving, but okay, this is a kindergarten which is fully replaced to apartments.
We add like to most buildings had corridor systems with one bathroom for the whole story or whatever, and we add like to each like 1 till 3 rooms a own bathroom, so it's like a little apartments, and only kitchen were a common kitchen.
Yeah, inclusivity is super important, especially now during the full-scale invasion, and this is also. We have great partners, an NGO and SME who do the target evacuation, and they couldn't bring, for example, this man to any other location because no one was able to host him. So this is really tough because the most vulnerable, they stay on the under shellings because they have no place to go. And this is really crazy. That's why it's super important really to follow all these principles. Also, we had really tough time with no electricity and blackouts, and we find that only these mission-driven initiatives can really, like, we were painting with lights, like nothing could stop us. Like the building with 2,000 square meters was rebuilt in 4 months, even during like cold times and no electricity.
Machine plastering was coming, like we had electricity in the night, so machine plastering came at like 12. In the night, at 12 in the night, and then they left at 6 in the morning, and then other builders had other things to do then.
Yeah, so we also work with municipalities, with oblast administration, but also with diverse partners, and we are very proud to start a new and one of the best of our projects with Habitat for Humanity, who are very well known here in US. This is their first project in Ukraine, and we do it in the partnership. So it's like a new model for non-for-profit housing together with Habitat for Humanity. Here is Rick. He is a director for East Europe and Asia. And we are very proud to have this partner who is 40 years in housing, operating in 70 countries, and this is like a huge experience for us we can learn from. We are super thankful for the international solidarity we have. It's like an amazing asset, and like everyone here who organized it, this is something which makes us continue and go and also remember what is important and be really free in what we dream of, actually. Yeah, we have a lot of in-kind support.
These are the
and
furnitures you saw, like this from Germany, I think, and yeah. And this is the project we did with Brooklyn Dumbo Studio. They made Ukrainian cups and donated to our project. But we made a beautiful photo shooting with our internally displaced women who are curing themselves with fashion
and beauty
in this humanitarian help. They find nice clothes and they clothe themselves nicely, and they are like, this is their way to
to cope with the
cope
trauma,
with it,
and we
yeah.
just started to notice that a lot of women, and especially elderly women, they were like having a festival like every day, and we started to notice that, and we really had a wonderful photographer from Ukraine who was shooting Monica Bellucci and
Olena Zelenska and our ladies.
And our ladies, and we did a wonderful exhibition here in Brooklyn and a very beautiful video. I hope we can
Spread it.
but also like it's wonderful to have such a support and such a cohesion in our
Different
worlds.
aspects, yeah,
And
yeah.
so these are just a few pictures of spaces which we were able to deliver within this time. Yes, with all the beds. And so, now we go on to the more sustainable, not temporary, but more long-term solutions. And this is also something which is super important, what we've seen in Georgia, how people from Abkhazia live in the same space for 30 years. And this was the point where we understood that we are on the right path, and we do it right, and we need to continue and scale and think of the model which is scalable and can contribute to more of dignified housing solutions.
Also, Palestinian story tells us that everything what is temporary right now is forever. It's their home for many years.
So we are really impressed of the audience and of the exhibition, and to be here. We are for the first time in US and New York, and to have such a support, it's just like it's always like these goosebumps, and also like coming from Ukraine, like you just have this other perspective on what is actually happening there, and it's like, it's super important for us to be here and to have this support here. Thank you so much.
Слава Україні!
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Iman. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Anna. Thank you for coming all the way, wherever you're coming, and thank you so much for sharing your story. We're really, really happy that we're able to provide this platform and space for these conversations, which are so important to have. We're gonna start with a couple of warm-up questions, I guess from the curators, but we also want to note that we want this to be more of a conversation. We're encouraging the audience to ask questions now. If you want to raise a hand, Katie and Sophie will be walking around. I'm sure there's be a lot, and it's really great. Katie and Sophie will be walking with the microphones. So just kind of raise your hand as we are having a first kind of round of questions for our guests here. We also encourage our guests to ask questions to each other. We would like this to be a really open conversation. Something that I would like to kind of a very complicated question. Something we've been talking about also before this event, and I think there could be an entire other panel about this, is the idea of home. and what is home. Obviously was the amount of destruction that's been happening due to war. One can't stop thinking what home means. I don't think there's a right answer to that. You know, for some people, home could be a space, an interior space, a collection of objects. For others, it could be just even a simple object because of the circumstances. I want to open this conversation and I guess ask, what is your perception of home personally, on your personal experience, or maybe from the stories that you heard from the people that, yeah, that's the question.
I have a short answer. Last year in Biennale Pavilion of Japan, it was written, "Architecture is a place to be loved." And I think it's home is a place where you are loved, where you love, where you live, and I think this where you feel this love. And it depends on every person. What is it? Is it like the beauty of design? Is it a person? Is it like it's a place where you feel love? I think that's my answer. And I think where these people, internally displaced people, when they feel loved, they instantly bloom. And it's such a beautiful feeling when you see those people open up and warm up and become like, in 2 days, they have different facial expression, you know? And this is what touches me the most. Yeah, this was like actually the part of my answer. You just see it physically if it's home or not, like, because when people moved to Co-Haty from like a year of changing rooms and sport halls for like 9 times for a year, and then they just start to do their casual thing, like to bake, to talk with their kids, like it's just, you just see like in 2 weeks, in a month, you see like a physical change, and you see that people are home. You just see that physically, and this is like the main thing, I think, when you are able to track this, and like this is something which gives us this motivation to continue, because you just see the difference like every day, and then a month, a year, and it's just yeah, it's beautiful to observe.
Very quickly before I'm on that, but I think you're not mentioning the important part, that it is all set up by the creator of the space, right? The setup of those activities, right, are recognized by the architect of the space, and that is something that I think is beautiful within the project and work that you do, is thinking. It's not even beyond the scope; it's kind of beyond the scope. Something that you didn't mention, that we talk a lot in our exhibition in your section, is the work that you're also doing with internally displaced, after they come into the housing and after they are already living there, considering that and understanding that you recognize that these people have not only lost homes as physical spaces, but they have lost an entire communities. They lost jobs, skills sets that they used to apply in the spaces where used to live, no longer applicable. And usually that's not an architect problem, right? So I kind of want to, I'm setting up also for you to answer or talk a little bit more about the workshops as well that you've been organizing, that you haven't mentioned in your presentation. Can you just speak a little bit about that too?
Yeah, sometimes we forget how much our like whole team does. We do the building operations, we do the community management, we do the dance workshop, the arts workshop, the kids camp, we do reskilling, we build
building teams who build housing further on. We do teams who do furniture. We reskill them to woodworking. So it's kind of after the building is done, the work continues or starts again, and it's all the new work. Then you do all the legal work with the person, like how do you register them? Does the person has the documents? So it's like so many things. You actually reorganize the whole life of each person, so that yeah, I mean, it's hard to do it with like 100% with each of them, but we have like the community management teams in each building who are able to help. And this is a lot of work. And we also have this kind of extra events with people coming from, I don't know, US and Vienna, and like talking to people, doing diverse activities. Like we have therapy, we have like
Children
it's,
camps.
yeah, maybe I forgot.
Yeah, very important also, like it's a pre-work project. We have like partners which are so in the frontline cities, they have no internet connection, no cell phone connection, and they are printing out those pictures and situations, like where to, like cities, and they go to them and show them, you should leave the front line with your family, and please you can come here, because they are afraid, they don't know. Sometimes, you know, you go out with your family and then they come back because they put them in some sports hall for months. It's cold, or you know, it's better to be home in your basement, you know, while everything is flying over your head. And they are like, it's a woman who is now going to the army, Sasha. She's as well Sasha, and she's like 21 years old, and she goes to the front line. She gives these brochures to these people, and she convinced them. She talks to them like nights long, just to try to get them out of these cities, you know, and then they bring them to the place which they choose. And then they are making documents for them, and it's like, and it's so hard to convince them, because they have their, I don't know, they have their cow in their village or something. It's they took, one guy had some, I don't know, inventions, some stuff, and he said he won't go without it, and they rented a truck just to move one person, you know, because he wouldn't go without it. And it's like work with each person, and it's like really saving lives, because also they convinced one family with 5 kids to move to Co-Haty in Kamianets, and 2 weeks later their house was hit by the missile, and we saved their lives like that, you know. And it's not happening if you don't go there and just ask them to come and show them where to go. This is very important for us.
Thank you. And this conversation, as I said, free-flowing. There's so much to share, and that's just outside of this exhibition, but also it is proving that you can provide home, right? And by that, convincing people to come to the project and save them from danger. But also, I think home also can have like a very different meaning in relationship to the conversation that you gave us. Amanda, you wanna?
Yeah, I mean, I think so many, it's so interesting because I feel like the definition of home is, when you said you're going to give a quick answer, I was like, wow. It's like,
All we do is just
but then yeah, no, it's true, because it's so difficult to describe. It's almost like you're describing the same things using different words. Like, there's so many different ways that home is defined by people, and, you know, whether it's like my own personal definition, it's really hard. It's like, you know, what are the things that, is it certain smells? Is it, you know, like when I see certain things that you kind of take for granted sometimes that are a part of your home, that like, once you are removed from it, when you see it again, you're like, that's how you know, like when I see pine trees, there's like a certain type of nature that when I now see here outside of the context of, for example, living in Jerusalem, that I'm like, that feels like home. And it's not something that you're conscious of, but it sort of just takes you back. There's this kind of memory and association to it. I think there's also like this question of different scales of home. I think what you guys were talking about too, which is people do get attached to not necessarily the house, but like certain things, like the color of the kitchen towels. That's something that defines home for them, or like you know, someone's invention of something, or like a gift that somebody gave you that sort of sits in your home somewhere. Like those are the things that I feel like it's so interesting and it's so difficult because whatever defines home for people is so varied. And I think the paradox is that sometimes no matter how you might redefine somebody's home in the place where they live, like their house, where they sleep, where they eat, that in many cases, especially internally displaced people, you are sort of in this consistent state of temporariness. And I think one thing that's so beautiful, just when you guys talked about dignity a lot, I think, in your work, and that's really important. And there have been efforts, you know, in, for example, refugee camps all over the world, where they've, you know, had even design competitions, which I have multiple, you know, sort of complicated thoughts about. But, you know, people have been thinking about how might we, in refugee camps where people, whether they're internally displaced or not, like, how do you sort of develop a sense of place and a sense of identity and comfort and belonging that is not temporary? Because I think being in a space where you feel dignified is really important. And so I think, you know, with internally displaced people, it's so confusing and complicated because you are still in your home. And in many ways, like if that's how you define home as, you know, your homeland, you have not left. And yet at the end of the day, you also feel like you're in this sort of state of, you know, transience and liminality. Like you're not existing in the kitchen that you love or in the, you know, so it's really complicated. And I feel like there's, yeah, I mean, just understanding how different people define it is really important. The way that we define it is so just changes also too. Like your frame of reference changes all the time. So, yeah.
Again, I just want to remind that we're really welcome to take questions from the audience. We have a great big audience, and already 2 questions. So I saw the one in the back first, and then we'll come up to the orange shirt. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the conversation. Diakyuma shukran. I'm one of the, I think my friend Terrell has also worked both in Ukraine and Palestine, and I want to compliment the organizers for this powerful conversation, bringing the two together. I was thinking about 1948 for Palestine, and also the fact for Western Ukraine, those were the years when it had been annexed by Russia to the USSR, and that these processes of resistance and reconstruction have been going on for equal times for many of the people involved. I wanted to ask about the significance of the civil society and community element in reclaiming houses, because I think it kind of plays different roles, but maybe similar in both. And I hope this is not the last time that there's such an opportunity for Palestine and Ukraine to show on each solidarity to one another. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to pass that to whoever would like to take it.
I think, yeah, that's what was mentioned before, that the scale of destruction is so big that no, I don't know, system, there is no enough money in the world, there is no 80 years kind of to rebuild. It's like so huge that it's impossible to tackle that I don't know, with some kind of system or program or fundraiser, or I don't know. You just really need to get everyone involved, like that everyone does something more or less, like what, it's like a whole, yeah, culture of like community rebuilding. Yeah, we have like, it's also like here on the exhibition, you have great examples. Like our observation was that the greatest architects of like in Ukraine were like all this festival and rave communities which were able to kind of gather the effort to gather people like to rebuild. And this is something we've learned in Ukraine, like this. You need everyone. You need everyone involved, otherwise you don't survive. And like the role of civil society is, yeah, you cannot even describe it. Like in the way we were also doing a research on diverse shelters and housing projects, and the ones which are driven by civil society, they have this soul and heart. You cannot explain that, but it's something special because you invest in that. You, like, people invest in that. It's not like, again, it's not a system or program which were put down and someone did their job. It's just someone wanted to do that, and someone did it beyond their, I don't know, limits and what a person was supposed to do. So I think it's, this is something we are still kind of researching on, like how it develops in Ukraine, how architecture develops in Ukraine now, like by whom and why. And this is like a very, very interesting thing, I think, to capture and to understand how we keep it beyond the urgency and beyond the crisis.
Sometimes it's really hard for us to explain, because why are we doing this extra bathroom in every, few rooms? And because like very big organizations, or they are counting, like they put one washing machine, it helped 200 people. They have counting, and we are not counting our efforts like that. We see how, if people are comfortable or are happy, it's like we have different measurements of help we deliver. And I think that's important in a civil society, and not like this system that you have to do the numbers, I mean, we also have to do the numbers, but we don't want to do them. We want to do the quality. Yeah.
I think that question of like the difference between urgency, logistics, and then like, whether it's quality or just the sort of, I don't know how to describe it, like the specificity of what belongs there. Like I was a part of this workshop where we were talking about how, what is the future of, the rebuilding of Gaza, for example. And, do we introduce workshops in schools? Do we do like, how do we sort of start to talk about this? And obviously the first thing that people talk about is, oh, it's all gonna be about modular prefab. Like we gotta just bring these things, And yes, like you do need immediate solutions. There is a sense of urgency, but at the end of the day, like that is not the typology that defines family structures there, for instance, And so there's something about there's not a very sort of like synchronized relationship between the solution that is urgent and then the solution that is sort of born from within. And I think maybe one thing that's also important, also just looking through the exhibition here, is understanding the role of civil society literally in like, how do we break down skills and expertise, from us as designers to builders. Like almost anyone can go up there and pick up a brick, and if they're able-bodied and whatever, like and so many communities rely on this kind of sort of literal self-rebuilding. And I think that's really important. And it's so, I mean, that is like, you guys were talking also about like the shifting of skills and who's like, that's a big part of the conversation now too, is how civil society can literally rebuild themselves. So I think what's interesting about, for example, the various efforts, NGOs and things like this, like the Israeli Committee on House Demolitions, for example, they rely entirely on volunteers. So like that house that I showed that was rebuilt, my brother volunteered one summer and did one of the reconstructions, and it was mostly just, people sort of us teaching, architects, builders, teaching people how to rebuild their own spaces. So I think that's really kind of almost maybe best way to describe urgency is like civil society sort of being involved immediately in the actual reconstruction.
Yeah, I think that's something that we see over and over in the exhibition in many, many projects, right? Is this idea of the knowledge exchange. So sometimes it's the knowledge exchange between the architects helping people to learn how to install a window or how to construct the bed that comes modularly packed. And sometimes it's the older people in villages who are teaching the younger people who came to help them rebuild. They came with energy and like muscles, and but they don't know how to fix a roof or they don't know how to lay brick, and so the older people in the villages are teaching them how to do it. So there's these really beautiful areas of knowledge exchange, right? Or as you're saying about reconstructing the house, and maybe again, people through the work there also were learning why it was important to reconstruct the house every time it was torn down. So there's these many stories about kind of knowledge exchange that I think is just another thread that runs through. I want to get back to your question because you had there was a raised hand here, and then we'll take more questions from the audience. So if you still have a question, yeah.
Hi, щиро дякую за вашу роботу, за вашу працю. The housing is a particular sort of touching subject because I was born in Bakhmut. I live here now, but I was born in Bakhmut, so we lost all of it. But what I want to know more about is how much agency the people who you give housing to have over like simple decisions, like what color walls, you know, what kind of lighting. And the second question is, what kind of new forms of ownership and legal framework are developing, considering this is going to be a huge undertaking after we win this war?
So we had also all our first projects. Now it's more systematic, but in the beginning, some families lived in better conditioned places on the construction site while building with us, like the house. And like rebuilding, we don't build new, we rebuild the existing, that's important for us, existing buildings which are abandoned, and they are mostly in the city, like well connected, and that's important for us. But we do this co-creation, also workshops with future inhabitants, how do you say it? Tenants, yeah. And but like all in all, we choose the color of the walls. It's normally like in the rooms are like neutral colors. The first one was green. It was like really the first one, but then it was like really neutral. And but they basically can do things when they live there, and but it's hard to do every time each room other colors. So it's basically they have no real influence on that. but we do the workshops, and they tell what they would like to have, what they like, what they don't like. We also think about psychological aspects of it, like what would be more like cozy, calming, and yeah. And about so like first, like they do the workshop, like we do the workshop with the tenants, so it influences the design. But basically, like also I wanted to tell that people, they just arrive with nothing. They just have one bag, so they need everything. So, and yeah, it's just like we equip the room with everything, with bed sheets, with, I don't know, we collect toys, we do curtains, we do everything, because people literally, they have nothing, and they also do not have money to buy stuff. So it's like, I hope we will arrive to the point where we can do some kind of shell and core or white, I don't know, cube with nice kitchen, whatever, and everyone will do their own, I don't know, style and design. But as of now, it's kind of not the case of if they are able to do that, but at least we have this opportunity to ask them, and they are kind of also very often, they are the part of the building site, so we kind of work together, and it's kind of also a pretty organic thing. About the legal structures, so like Ukraine has a housing codex from 1984, so it was not changed, and only now there is a draft of a housing law, and we contribute to this housing law. And with our experience as well, like what people need. And for example, like in Ukraine, I think people know who are from Ukraine, they tell people will never rent a house. They need their own house. There is a strong need for the ownership after the Soviets because everything was common, blah, blah, blah. But it's not true. Like we've experienced also when you deliver a certain quality and a sense of security, people don't go, because we had this experience that people who were living in Co-Haty, like as a they have a contract which prolongs every year, but they didn't want to change to their own home because they were offered a new home which will get their home in 3 or 5 years, and no one moved, no one family. So it was our kind of win, like in the sense that it was kind of like ruining the myth that Ukrainians are not willing to rent, and this was very important because in Ukraine 99.9% of housing is private, and the biggest tragedy is like that 7 million of people, they went out of the country, and 7 million they kind of shifted to the west, but like all this housing was just locked, and the others they had no place to stay. So we really need to develop the rental housing system, the security. So this is something we work on. So now I feel like I'm more like a lawyer than an architect, because this is the main issue we're working on, is the legislation, a new law. Even within the current law, we do this non-for-profit housing, rental housing. Within the current law, it's a bit weird, and really complex. We have like best lawyers working for that, and but this is something which is super important, and our goal is to prove that it's wrong, that that we cannot have it. So we really need it. Yeah, because of this private ownership, for example, we rent, but you never know when this woman will arrive and say that she will sell this apartment, give it to their daughter, I don't know, whatever, you know, it happens a lot. So the main issue is like, we are always being said like, why do you do renovation in your rental home if you will get kicked in 2 months, you know, this is always feeling of this, being unsecure. And while they know that this is just made for rent, this housing is like belongs to no one else, and they will be able to rent it, or just they don't rent, they pay only utilities, but the government also returns them. But I think the main issue is just that you don't feel secure.
Again, I think that's like a beautiful lesson for architecture and designers, is that we're often trying to convince people, or project an idea that people are very skeptical of. Once it's completed and physical and in the real world, it's a completely different way of convincing people, and usually the design does the convincing for us. We can stop talking, right? So it's such a beautiful story that you've been successful in that, and that people are happy and they actually want to stay, is probably the best success story as an architect. People want your space. Yeah, you're right. We often don't know until it's finished. There are other questions, and wow. There are so many questions. We have a few minutes, so we'll try to get quickly to as many as we can.
Hi, my name is Kaita Daku. Thank you for coming, for your words, your efforts. I was wondering, kind of regarding, how do you find not only the internal motivation, but also raising the funding and gathering like everyone else's motivation that's maybe not directly in your sphere? to continue building housing and continue just fostering these efforts and going out into the front lines and gathering people to come back as well?
I don't know if I understood the question right. Yeah, how the motivation. Yeah, we have a hobby to go to 40 kilometers from the front line, deoccupied villages that were flooded as well, and we help grannies to rebuild on our vacation, and this is really motivating. And I invite our friends to come with us, and we also did this pilot work by our own hands, so just to show people. And we also did this kilt with the story, and we participated in Biennale in Venezia, and we told the stories of these people and about moving, about architecture, taking other angles, and it's important to talk about it. And it's also for us, it's important to get this feedback from people. And we really, we must say, it's a very budget project. What we do is with adding the bathrooms, with doing more function, we build, I don't want to lie, way cheaper through this community, from connections, from all of this donating furniture, used furniture. Yes, we build way cheaper than other organizations. I would also tell that it's hard. It's really hard. It's not like every day you are just getting up and today. It's in 2.5 years, sometimes it's getting really hard, and there are also a lot of challenges in Ukraine, and it's sometimes you are promised a funding of €1.4 million, and they don't give you, and in 4 months they tell you, oh, you will have 300,000, and you don't know, because you almost ruin your team and your projects with waiting and promises and your reputation. And so it's really hard. It's not, but it's something, I think what I realized within this time is consistency and a really a very clear path is something which is the most important thing. Is it's not that you have the motivation every day. It's every day is a very hard work, and you and at some point you have this I don't know, conversation which is really motivating, because sometimes it's just an opportunity to see how much was done by the team, and really be proud of yourself and get this extra motivation and go back and work again. So it's yeah, I think consistency is the main thing. There is no inspiration and motivation in 2.5 years.
I think just kind of what is trying to be said, motivation is continue having these conversations, is a motivation, I think, as well. Even just speaking for myself, is hearing conversations like this and hearing stories like this, that's what motivates. And for you, on the other hand, is, as you mentioned at the beginning, is going to the front lines and see exactly what's happening there. And understanding, I guess, your privilege within the, there's always kind of layers and levels of privilege that you understand that you have, right? And that what motivates you, right?
I think we can take one more question. Yes, right here, and then we'll have some time for informal chatting afterwards.
I'll try and keep this quick. It's maybe a little bit off topic, but how do you deal with harassment or negative attention from people who support the domicide and the killing and everything? I know that's a bit of a dour question.
That's a really hard question. I hope that no one, regardless of your political leanings and belief, that no one supports domicide. So obviously there's stronger and less, strong opinions about, but I would hope that, like, that is maybe one thing, like the right, I mean, housing is a human right, and so much of what people have been saying about domicide is, first of all, they want to sort of add it to the Geneva Conventions, because domicide is not even officially a term that's used in relation to genocide, but that housing is a human right, and that domicide is not a war crime, it is a crime against humanity, and that maybe this is like the one, like housing, and this is why this conversation is so important, that housing is the one topic that everyone should agree on. And this is, I'm not answering your question, I'm just saying this is what everyone should think. And I think that maybe that is the one thing that people do kind of come together on, is a right to a home, and a right to an understanding of the home. And I think understanding the fact that home means something different to different people, and being open to understanding what it means to different people and their needs, I think is the way to really deal with it. So when someone tells you you don't deserve X or whatever, like, they don't know. And I think it's more just about, sort of being consistent and sharing your stories, and yeah, you guys might have more specific responses.
What I've seen is that, in the urgency, like, we are all humans, and it's different, and it's better. It's getting better in Ukraine. Like, and this is something which impresses me all the time. So,
Yeah, I think we should actually wrap up, because the Center for Architecture closes at 8, and there are so many people who had many more questions, and we would absolutely invite you to come up. Our guests will be hanging around, we will be hanging around, all of you will be hanging around. So please strike up a conversation with someone else, or also as you make your way out to the street, please stop and check out parts of the exhibition that you didn't have time to see on the way down. So thank you so much all for coming, and thanks to our guests.
I wanted to thank the public, and you had very inspiring eyes. What's about inspiration? And this was the most asked questions in all of our previous, this was really nice. Thank you.